Hello, today I'm going to talk to you about a sample final exam, and I'm going to give you an explanation. My name's Charles W. Marshall. You can reach me at CWM or cmarshall0050 at kctcs.edu. Create an ERD with Toad for this situation. That's going to be your statement on the final exam. This is just a sample of the kind of question it will be. So in this example, the City Recreation Department manages activities for multiple sports. There are several venues in the city. Each is suitable for one or more sports. Each sport has a maximum allowable number of hours for a game or practice, and they're the same. There are a minimum number of youth that are allowed on a team, and there's a maximum number of youth that are allowed on a team. The city manages one or more leagues per sport, and the venues are scheduled in 1-hour blocks. Blocks are available from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. and always start on the hour. The schedule will be for an 84-day season, 12 weeks. Each league must have at least 4 teams, but no more than 16 teams. Some, but not all leagues, will be co-ed. The city youth can play one or more sports, but any youth can play only one team per sport. Okay, and what are the objectives of the database? For each youth registered in the city, capture their name, home address, gender, and age. Record the names of each sport, the teams that play that sport. Record the youth members on each team. Record if a player was present or absent for each game or practice. Ensure no youth is scheduled to play in multiple games or practice sessions at the same time. So don't let anybody double book. Record the venue and time where each team is scheduled to play or practice. The database should have a way to record the opposing team or that it was a practice and not a game. Alright, so that seems pretty complex, but as we said before, the way you attack something that's complex is break it down into simple steps. And so the first thing we're going to do is identify the entities in the question and the attributes we need to store about each. Define the relationships between the basic entities. Define the intersection entities that are needed to enforce stated needs. Okay, so let's do the first one. Identify the basic entities in the question and the attributes we need to store on each. So the first one I see is sport. And so here's the entity. We're going to call it sport. It's going to have a sport ID, a sport name, the maximum hours, the maximum sessions hours, and I made it a byte because it's not going to be more than 128. The minimum that you can have on a team, and the maximum that you can have on a team. Oh, and notice that the primary key is Sport ID. Okay, as I read down through here, the next thing I see is leagues. So we create a league entity, and its primary key is League ID. It has a foreign key of Sport ID, which will help us know what sport each league is for, a league name, and male members. Now I'm playing a game with that. It's just yes, no, but if it's all boys, it's going to be yes. If it's all girls, it's going to be no. And if it's co-ed, it's going to be null. Next entity is venues. So a venue is the name of the entity. Its primary key is venue ID. We're going to capture its name, its street address, its city, state, and phone. And that's so if somebody says Joe's Gym, they have some idea where to go find Joe's Gym, or if a parent wants to know where Joe's Gym is, they will have a way to find it. Next one I see is schedule. Now, we're going to have to be somewhat creative because we need a schedule. We know it's going to be 84 days in a season, and we know it's only going to run from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. on each of those days. So the way I did that was I created an entity called time slots, and each time slot has an ID, and it's going to be whether it's day 1, day 2, day 3 through day 84, and what's the start hour, and I'm going to use 24-hour clocks, so I'm going to have time, it's going to be 10, 11, 12, 13, 1400, and so forth. I'm going to finish, when we first initialize the database, I'm going to have a program that loads all those at the get-go so that every possible time slot will be defined. The next thing I see is I've got an entity that I need called team. So team is the name of the entity. Team ID is the primary key. It has a foreign key of league ID, so I can tell what league the team's playing in, and the team has a name. And the last entity I see on this page is youth. So I've got a youth ID, their first, middle name, last name, street address of the person, male gender, so that's a yes, no, so male is yes and female is no. Date of birth, I'm using date of birth rather than age so that I can calculate their age in any given day and not have to have somebody call up every kid and change their age every month to find all the people that had a birthday. Okay, next we're supposed to define the relationships between the basic entities. So I made a one-to-many between league and team. I made a one-to-many between sport and team and league. Define intersection entities required to enforce the stated needs. Okay, so we said that there's going to need several venues in the city, and each is suitable for one or more sports. So I created a venue by sport, and it's going to have a primary key of venues, sport ID, and foreign keys of sport, and foreign key of venue. We're going to record youth members on a team. So I built an entity called team members, and it's going to have a foreign key of team ID and a foreign key of youth ID, and just because I'll put something in there, I'll put a position note. So if this youth is the pitcher or plays center or fullback or whatever, goalkeeper if it's soccer, you can record what position the youth plays. Ensure that no youth is scheduled to play on multiple game or practices sessions at the same time. Well, I'm going to build an entity called youth activity, and I'm going to have a foreign key of time slot ID, and I'm also going to load the team ID and the youth ID, and so that's going to let me know both whether the team is scheduled more than one place in the same time slot. It's going to let me tell whether the youth was at that time slot, were they present, and were there any notes, scored the winning goal or kicked out for technical, whatever. Record the venue and time each team is scheduled to play or practice. The database should have a way to record the opposing team so that it was a practice and not a game. So I created an entity called schedule activity, and I've got a venue ID, a venue sport ID, which means that I'm going to get a new record for every venue in sport, and a foreign key of sport ID and venue ID and time slot ID, and I'm going to record team 1 and team 2, which will be linked back to the team records. If to practice, I'll only have a team 1. And so my complete ERD looks like this. And that's the process. If I had been given that final exam, I would have gone through. And you're going to get a statement, a problem statement much like that. And it won't necessarily be that complex, but this ERD, I think, will solve that problem statement. And as we come up on the final, I wanted you to have an idea of, the kind of questions and a process to go through to answer them. I think if you look at it, you're going to find out that it's nothing you haven't already done. And in fact, if you break it down and step through it a step at a time, that it really is fairly straightforward. However, if you have any questions, call me or email me at cmarshall0050@kctcs.edu. Thank you very much. I hope this was of help.